Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Welcome to my Holly Jolly Christmas series. My first project is using a couple of these artist panels that I flip the other side so I can see the frame. I stained them with a dark walnut stain last year, but these didn't get used, so I thought I would repurpose them for this project. I painted the inside with linen white chalk paint, and now I'm going to just dry brush on some Christmas trees. With a small dry brush, I am just adding a little bit more dimension into the center of the tree. I'm going to do the same thing for the second panel. I'm using a different tree stencil and I'm just pushing it off to the left. With the first tree, I'm using these little mini alphabet stencils and I'm going to use a pencil to trace out the word Merry going down the left-hand side, and then Bright will go down the right-hand side of the tree. Using a fine point black marker, this is just a regular scrapbooking marker, I'm just going to fill in the stencils. Since this phrase is supposed to be merry and bright, I decided to write the and sign, or the ampersand if you want to call it that, on the top of the tree just to give it a little bit of an interesting look. I'm using a tiny fine tip artist brush and Deco Art chalk paint in the color Romance. Using the same pen, I'm going to just draw a tiny shadow line on the left-hand side of every letter. To add a little bit more detail to this frame, I decided to take a thin buffalo check ribbon and hot glue it all the way around the inside of the frame. To add even a more festive touch, I'm just taking some of these little pine picks, hot gluing them on the top, and then adding a few berries. Now I'm taking about a 2-inch piece of the little ribbon and cutting a dovetail at the end of one end, and I'm going to just place it inside the greenery just to add a couple of tails. For the second sign, I decided to just freehand the word Merry just with my marker, and now I'm going to add some more details to each of the letters. You could also use some stencils if you're not good at the freehanding. If you have a Cricut, of course, you could use some vinyl or create a stencil with that. I'm not using the buffalo check ribbon for this one, but I am going to add a couple sprigs of greenery and some berries to the left-hand corner. I think these two turned out pretty cute. My second project for you today is using this free printable gingerbread man. I'll have it down in my description box. And I'm using some white contact paper. It can be clear or black or any color that you have. I cut out a small square and I'm going to tape it onto my cutting mat because I'm going to be using an X-Acto knife to cut out a gingerbread shape. I've cut the paper smaller for the gingerbread man, and now I'm going to tape him right on top of the vinyl. Using a very fine and sharp craft knife, I'm just going to be cutting out the gingerbread man, making sure I use enough pressure to go all the way through to the vinyl. Make sure that you're really careful and you don't rip any of the contact paper. If you have to, do some little extra cuts to make sure it pops out cleanly. I'm going to be using the gingerbread man himself, but I'm also left with a nice gingerbread stencil that I could use for a different project. I'm using this really long cutting board that I picked up at my Dollarama, and I want to make sure that I'm using the brown side because I want my gingerbread man to turn out brown. I'm going to peel off the backing and then just really rub hard to stick the gingerbread man right onto the board. I'm adding a couple of strips of painter's tape so I can leave about an inch of the wood showing at the top and the bottom. Using linen white chalk paint from Rust-Oleum, I'm going to paint inside all over the wood, making sure that I'm very gentle when I go over that contact paper because I don't want any of the paint to seep underneath. It's definitely not as sticky as if you were using, say, the Cricut vinyl, but it's going to work for this job. I was so excited to see if this worked that I didn't even wait for the paint to dry, which is actually something you probably shouldn't do. You want to take it off when the paint is wet. I'm sorry my big fat hand is in the way there, but look at how cute that turned out. Using a white paint pen, I'm going to draw the squiggly lines on his hands and feet to show the icing, and then I'll draw his little face in too. I'm also going to give him some little black eyes and some red buttons. I've got a piece of painter's tape on the paint because I want to make sure that the word I write in is nice and straight. So I'm starting in the middle of the word gingerbread. I've counted out the letters and I'm going to start in the center, work my way to the end of the word, then come back into the center and work my way to the start of the word. I'm doing this freehand and I'm trying to do a bit of a Ray Dunn kind of font, which is just kind of a tall and narrow font. So now I've moved my masking tape down and I'm going to do the words baking company in smaller font underneath the word gingerbread. Using the fine point of the marker, I'm going to just write in fresh daily. I'm going to thicken up the letters just a tiny bit, and then I'll use this same marker to draw some shadow lines on Gingerbread Baking Company. I'm going to be hanging this sign on my kitchen cupboards this year, and since I'm going with a buffalo check theme, I'm going to add a little hanger to the top. And to add a little bit more detail, I'm going to hot glue a piece of ribbon to the top and the bottom of the white space. None of my projects would be complete without a little bit of distressing, so I'm just taking a chip brush with a little tiny bit of black paint, going around the edges, and then I will also do the sides and a little bit on the front. This board is just the sweetest thing. I'm so excited. This last sign is using one of these palette frames that I built for myself in the summertime. I'm going to just give the interior some linen white chalk paint. I like the look of the raw wood, but I wanted to add a little bit more depth to the frame. So I'm using this Varathane gel stain in the color Dark Walnut, and I'm just going to use a rag to apply it and rub it in. I love the rustic look of the raw edges, but I decided to just touch them a little bit with the stain to make it blend better with the frame. This is a printable that I created myself. I used Google Drawings, and if you're not familiar with the Google products, they're actually fairly easy to use. I was able to take the word Christmas and just place it on an arc and then print it out on my computer. What I'm doing now is just tracing the back of the letter and coloring it in with pencil because that's how I will transfer the letters onto my sign. I like to use a pen when I'm transferring my letters because it's much easier to get a really firm grip with it and be able to get a nice line underneath. After I'm done the first letter, I always check to make sure that it's transferring properly, and it is. Here's what it looks like. It's a little difficult for you to see, but it's very faint, but I can see it very nicely. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to trace out the letters using my Craft Smart oil-based pen in black. I did start out with the thicker marker, but then I switched to the thinner marker because I found I was coloring outside the lines. And you guys know that coloring outside the lines is kind of frowned upon. So I wanted to make sure I didn't make any messes. Using one of the tree stencils, I'm going to just place one in the right-hand bottom corner, and I'm using a blend of a green paint and some black. I wanted this to not be a solid black tree. I wanted it to have a little bit of green color to it. Using some painter's tape again to make sure I have a straight line, I'm going to freehand some words. I'm going to write bakery, fresh cut trees, and gift shop, and we'll see how it turns out. Again, for this, you could use stencils, you could do the transfer method that I just showed you with Christmas Market, and of course, if you have a Cricut, go ahead and use vinyl. I added some little scroll designs down at the bottom and in between all of the letters and words. And now I'm just going to be dry brushing a little bit of black on top. I also added some little dots of red paint on the tree to make it look like a Christmas tree. For a final touch, I'm going to take a small dry brush and just pounce some white onto the tree to make it look like it's been kissed by the snow. I hope you liked my 3 Christmas signs today. If you did and you're new to my channel, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Those 2 black arrows will show you exactly where to click. Thank you so much for watching right to the end. I really appreciate it. See you in the next one.